Okay, welcome back, class. So I'll be continuing our topic, and now I'll be talking about classifying some different hazards which are occurring in the world. So we have talked about some different hazardscape and different natural characteristics, but how do we classify some different hazards? So let's. There are some classification by the um different organizations in the world in which they have the data sets, how many hazards have happened in an area, how many disasters have happened in an area, what was the intensities, what was the scale, what was the damages, how many deaths, and this kind of data is available. So I personally, EM credit database, I've been using it for a long time. So that data has a lot of uh, you can say different hazard characteristics are already there. So if you want to browse through it, you'll find a lot of things. And they define disaster as, and a disaster is when a hazard can cause 10 or more deaths, 100 or more people are affected, or or the country or a state calls it an emergency, state of emergency, and it needs external help. So that is criteria to be entered in this database. So they will not incorporate all the hazards in the world, but those hazards which have caused damages. So that like those hazards which have been converted into disasters. So those database are already there. So yes. So generally we classify it depending upon the first group. First group is geophysical. So any type of disaster which is linked to the geophysics of the planet are are called geophysical hazards. It incorporates earthquake, volcanoes, and mass movements like landslides. So in earthquake, what kind of, we call it ground shaking, the most common one, and the tsunami. In mass movements or landslides, there are different types: rockfall, snow avalanche, mud landslide, and the land is subsidence, land is degraded, and these are also then subcategorized into snow avalanche, debris, mudslide, debris flow. These different kind of terminologies, and we'll go into the detail when we're talking about hazard assessment. So depending upon different category or the nature of different hazards, look at this classification. This extensive classification would uh, help us, or you can say would have its own mechanism for hazard assessment. So one hazard assessment using for debris avalanche cannot be used for the snow avalanche. So depending upon the type of hazard, your hazard mechanism or measuring or assessing a hazard will vary. Then as your hydrological hazards, anything which is linked to your water systems or water bodies. So floods or movement, landslides can also be wet. It can be underwater as well. So any landslide which can link to the water bodies is also part of it. So floods are generally characterized as riverine floods, flash floods, or storm surge or coastal flooding. Then is a climatological hazard, which incorporates to extreme heats or temperature. It is heat wave, cold wave, extreme weather conditions. Then your drought, forest fires, wildfires. So these are some subcategories. Then is meteorological, which includes storm, which is part of which is enhanced by the climate. So tropical storm, cyclones, hurricanes, this kind of thing. And then your storms, some dust storms, your snowstorms, tornadoes. That's also linked to your meteorology. Then is your biological hazards, which are the epidemics, and we have now been going through the epidemic. So I would know, you would know better, you would know more details about it, and different types of even epidemics. So we are uh, right now we are living in the viral infection diseases category. So there are a lot of infection diseases out there. Some infestation is a part of biological hazard, like locust, which is happening in Pakistan in the last 2-3 years. This locust swarms or this attack is happening in Pakistan as well, in the Middle East and in South Asia. And then special kind of disaster which is extraterrestrial, meteoroid or asteroid. So right now we have not experienced some kind of a disaster, but are maybe some previous civilizations or extinction events might have been caused by these kind of disasters. But it is a category out there. It should sometimes it is studied by the uh, uh, astrophysicist. So sometimes these are based on definition that geophysical hazards are those hazards which are originating from the solid earth. Meteorological, which is short-lived or small-scaled atmospheric. Hydrological, particularly linked to your water cycles. Climatology, like these are long-lived and at a bit like bigger scale than your meteorological level. Those are climatological and this biological hazards linked to living organisms or germs or toxic substances. So these are some different reclassifications. Sometimes people are nowadays hydrometeorological disasters are also linked together. So this category, hydrometeorological, are often used. If I'm talking about hydrometeorological disasters or hydrometeorological hazards, I'm talking about floods, storms, and extreme events. So these are predominantly caused by these events are influenced by the climate change. Geophysical and biologicals are not so much by the climate change, but these three are directly influenced by the climate change. So often, when I'm talking about climate change or climate change induced hazards, climate change induced extreme events, I'm talking about hydrometeorological disasters like flash flooding, storm, and extreme temperature. Okay, so these are all, again, atmospheric sourced, again, reclassifications, geological sourced or geophysical sources, so that mud flows and sinkholes, hydrological, extraterrestrial processes, biological processes. And then is you're talking about the human-made disasters. So some are technological, caused by different technological failures of your infrastructure, bridges. That is technological disasters. Hazardous material, your oil spills, your let's say uh, these nuclear meltdowns. That can be hazardous material, which can have leakage of radiations. Industrial factors in which your industries might blow up due to unsafe conditions. Some mining disasters in which you can have mine collapses, fires in these kind of coal mines. Then your nuclear plants, anything can happen. It is very hazardous. Transportation disasters caused by different failure of highways, infrastructure, maritime. And then your structural disasters, in which huge buildings are collapsed due to unsafe construction or poor construction materials. Another are these were okay. These are also called non-intentional hazards. So now about intentional hazard like shootings, civil disobedience, terrorism, and weapons of mass destruction. These are also man-made but intentionally caused hazards. So this is two categories of man-made is intentional and non-intentional. And in non-intentional, you have seen different categories, and intentional you are shooting, civil disobedience, terrorism. But this is also fall under the broader category of disaster risk reduction as well. So these are the different percentages of how many hazards have caused which type of disasters. So generally, it is assumed earthquake is most hazardous, which can cause damage. One event can cause huge damages, but flood has affected a lot of people. So these two, earthquake and floods, are the predominant, or you can say the two most hazardous events which have caused damages worldwide. And the weather, and quite recently, your uh, hydrometeorological uh, hydrometeorological hazards have increased in the intensity, particularly due to climate change. So earthquakes have been happening in the past as well as today, but the intensities of floods have skyrocketed. These are different trends of disaster. Overall, your natural hazards have gone up, and try not using the word natural disaster, natural hazard. So these are some old statistics, but after 2016, predominantly we have shifted from natural disaster to natural hazard terminology. Okay, so thank you very much.